So, Doug, I want to ask you a little bit about the themes in Siberia. I'm particularly fascinated, and I've been fascinated with this term cyberdelics, which connects the idea of cybernetic systems and computers and high technology with psychedelic substances, expanding your mind. There's a lot of people out there that think that the computer revolution is the literalization of the psychedelic dream of mind expansion, and that the confluence of the counterculture and the computer culture in the early 60s, like in a sense, sparked this world where it was like, these computers can extend our minds. Computers are the new LSD, and so on and so forth. You know this world very well. Do you want to just riff a little bit on your thoughts on that?
Well, I don't know. For me, it was kind of a surprise. You know, I went to Princeton in the early 80s when there weren't many, there weren't that many interesting people there, to use the word interesting. And there certainly weren't many psychedelic, counterculturally theater people there. And after I graduated, I found that the other 9 of the other 12 psychedelic Princeton people had all ended up moving to California to work in the high-tech industry. And that seemed really weird to me, because when I grew up, people who used computers were the kids who kind of cut right angles in the corridors of the high school and stuff. So I wanted to find out why people who were, for the most part, more stoned than I was, the true deadhead people would go out there. So I went out and spent time with these people who were, working at Intel during the day and going home scraping the buds off peyote cactuses at night, and trying to figure out why were these people attracted to it, and then why were these people the ones being hired to do it? And what I figured out in the early 90s was that people who had hallucinatory experience were really the only people who weren't afraid to build these platforms, to build this reality. These were people who were accustomed to imagining something that then appeared. Right. So these are people who then had to go and do that as their job.
Right off the bat, it makes me think of this idea, you have all these companies that are talking about creativity and out-of-the-box thinking, and we got to get our employees to think differently and don't look at what is, but think of what could be. Stephen Johnson, in his book, Where Good Ideas Come From, talks about the adjacent possible.
Right.
And he says the adjacent possible is a shadow future. It's this thing that's not quite there, and it hovers over the present.
I'll tell you that, but
and so how do you get there,
The problem here, though, is that deliberate and disciplined psychedelics users bring back what they've learned back to terra firma and implement it in real life in a real way.
Yeah.
And there's a kind of an implicit morality in that. And the kinds of people who were doing computers then were the kinds of people who shared a kind of a common sense of values about people and weirdness and paradox and the arts and all that. And when I look at the people who are programming our reality today, I see kids graduating from Stanford going to work for Goldman Sachs to build algorithms that work on the stock market to outsmart human traders. So I don't feel that value system's implicit anymore. That the adjacent possible is no longer necessarily connected to the real, but is an alternative reality. Let's build this platform. And it harkens back to stuff McLuhan was talking about back in his dissertation when he wrote about the trivium. That there were, these kind of 2 sects in sort of throughout history, the grammarians who were very concerned with sort of what is, and the dialecticians, the constructivists who were sort of out there on, what can we do? What can we construct? What else can we, and the constructivists, it was very consonant with industrialization and the Renaissance and progress and where are we going to go, where are we going to take this thing. But, that eyes on the prize mentality is kind of an abstraction when it's not counterbalanced by
being present.
being present, right?
Yeah, well,
being by the real.
Yeah, and I understand everything that you're referring to here, and so it almost sounds like what you're saying is that that dream that existed maybe when you wrote Siberia, or the ideas that John Markoff explores and what the Dormouse says when he says that this 1960s moment, this counterculture, these computers, this dream that was conceived and potentially to be literalized now, you're saying that the value system that exists today is not the same. So instead of people creating an app to transform the world, they want to create some little app that they can like put on the stock market
It
and
became
sell for
more the
$1 billion.
quest. Well, yeah, or even in the best case, it's the quest to make second life. Second life rather than this life. Where we are alive.
Yeah.
And we talk a lot about the singularity. I get word, the singularity to me seems to be kind of a self-loathing, kind of anti-human zombie apocalypse fantasy.
Yeah. Well,
Where the story they tell is that the history of evolution is information itself striving towards greater states of complexity.
Yes.
Human beings are really good and culture is really good
Sure.
for doing that for the last few thousand years, but now computers are even better at doing that.
Right.
So people are only going to be necessary insofar as we can help computers manifest the next stage of evolution. And to argue, as I do, that no, humans matter, we've got to, is hubris. Who says humans matter? And I say humans matter because I'm on Team Human.
Well, it's interesting. When Kurzweil talks about the singularity and he addresses the criticism where people say, oh, the AIs are going to take over and displace us, he says, you keep talking about the AI as if it's them, but that's really going to be us. I mean, he echoes some of the ideas of David Chalmers and Andy Clark, who says we need to get over our skin bag bias, and that these technologies, if you zoom out and you look at it from the outside, these technologies are actually a part of us. They are our second skin. Just like the spider's web is a part of the spider, our smartphones, our technology, our computers are like a scaffolding of mind. I mean, when you look at the Mars rover on Mars, that's the human mind is crawling Mars.
Yeah, but
the Hubble Space Telescope allows us to mainline the whole of time through our optic nerve. So it's not. I don't think that we're being replaced as much as far as being augmented. But this is my interpretation. I mean,
I mean, it depends. If you're part of the camp that wants to upload human consciousness to a silicon chip and watch it go, then I think that then you've got no problem with skin bag bias. I'll tell you that much. But I think there's a danger there that the problem with constructivism, while it's great to plan, is it's very hard to to remember that we have to keep testing it against reality.
Right.
What might be has to continually be tested against what is. And it goes all the way back to the invention of the first medium, the invention of text. Once we could write things down, we got time travel.
Yeah.
Right? We could write about what happened in the past. We got history, and we got the future. So then we got the messianism and Moshiach and all that. And Moshiach and the future and where we're going and Tikkun Olam. That's all beautiful as long as it's constantly tested against.
Well, but don't you think that language allowed us to dream? Because by conceiving of what might be was the catalyst for human imagination,
and
to imagine what
and
could
industrialization
be,
and all
to yearn, to dream, to sort of take the protoplasmic yearning of biology and articulate it into this beautiful.
It did, and dreaming is beautiful as long as, just like with the psychedelic trip, as long as that dream is then integrated back into reality rather than engineered as a way to get out of reality.
Yeah, well, it's okay, definitely. And one of the things you talk about is the comparison between this sort of digital future and bringing it back to the human spectrum of experience. So I'm really interested in experience design, and I'm interested in technologically mediating experience, right? So this is something I'm obsessed with just because for my own interest in being blissed out, when I watch movies, when I listen to beautiful music, when I experience aesthetic arrest. These are all technologies, right? Cinema, truth,
Since
24 times per second.
Since the cave paintings and all we've been experimenting with from the beginning is kind of challenging our proprioception, challenging where does my body end and the rest of reality begin. I mean, the museums, if you look at the history of museums, you see dioramas, what were they? Whoa, and then holograms, whoa, then virtual reality, whoa!
Yeah, Faulkner says, a writer wants to fit the world into a sentence. A filmmaker wants to fit the world into that film. When you go to a museum, you want to fit history into an experience that fits into your now. It's almost like you want to process the world into this moment. See the world in a grain of sand and in a wild flower. So Diana Slattery has that amazing article about she talks about the term, or the trope, high. And she says whether it's drug-induced highs or technological highs, high resolution, high fidelity, our desire to just chase these blissful mind-body states that seems to be integral to the human condition, and us using our tools and folding those tools back into the self to essentially hack perception, hack experience, hack consciousness. I mean, don't you think that's an amazing opportunity for us to play? I mean, does that excite you?
It's an amazing opportunity for us to play, for sure. And although I've seen, many acid casualties along the way of the people that chased just a few too many highs, I'd hate for our civilization to become an acid casualty. But the other problem for me is who's building these technologies? Who are we in concert with? When I say, okay, so Google's building these technologies, and yeah, they're also building robots that really are good at chasing and shooting down people, and well, they're donating it to the World Wildlife Federation to chase poachers, who we all know are really bad, so that's a very socially acceptable way to build robot drones that chase down people. And we know Google will do no evil, so we don't have to worry about that, and the government would never get a hold of the, I mean, I don't know, while we're chasing our highs, we are supporting the creation of a technological structure that we're not really in charge of.
So does that scare you? I mean, do you anticipate like some totalitarian information state where we're not free? Or McKenna talking about us each moving into universes of our own construction where big data is used to create engineered serendipities, where everything that's always around is custom for us and our tastes, and the smart systems that start, we dovetail our minds to our tools, but when the tools start dovetailing back, the distinction between self and world is going to become really flimsy, because everything is going to have mind in it. Everything is going to have my mind in it, because everything is going to be responding to my tastes and my desires and my needs. I mean, I imagine a sort of playground, a kind of wake-walking lucid dream mediated by technology. Kind of like the end of Vanilla Sky, when he's in that lucid dream.
Could be.
That's what I fantasize
Could
about.
be. It could be. But, for me, the best part of a trip is always waking up in the morning. I mean, coming down is the good part. It should be anyway. Coming down is the part where you're like, okay,
what have I
now
learned?
what? Yeah, what did I learn, and how do I apply this, and what is this? And then, and then you go out in the woods and you smell reality again from that new place, and you realize, oh my God, I'm only 1% of what I could be. And I think we both shared that. We're only 1% of what we could be.
Yes.
The question is, where is that other 99%? Is that other 99% by building these technologies that can then do this stuff, or are we leaving that 99% behind and building technologies that can house the 1% that we already know about?
You just said something that really got me excited. You talked about what happens after the trip, this idea that ego death results in a kind of reset of the self. And you go and smell the roses, and smell reality, and you've been changed in some way. You've been conditioned by the experience, and you want to go out and be a better person, and you want to exercise new possibilities, and so on and so forth. So I want to ask you, and
to the very best thing about psychedelics is you come back and you see the structures that you've been accepting at face value as given circumstances of your reality, and you see them as social constructions of people who may or may not have had our best interests at heart, right? So when when our very best digital people are, say, building Twitter and disrupting this industry or that, but then what do? They go to Daddy at Goldman Sachs and do an IPO and reify the worst shit of our society. They basically turn it into another prop for Wall Street. The opportunity of moving into a digital age is not to build upon the mistakes of the industrial age, but to challenge the industrial age and retrieve all of the values that got repressed the last time. That's McKenna's archaic revival. That's McLuhan's retrieval of values. So what I saw on my technological trip, when I saw it was, oh my gosh, you mean we can transact in a peer-to-peer fashion without corporations? Oh, we can invent local currencies and we can use our iPhones to do authentication. We can we can look back at reality again rather than just build on the artificial structures that we've had before. And my concern is when we just go headlong for the high, there's a ton of powers that be that are more than happy to
serve you that high.
Yeah, to get you and me high, as long as they get the big data that they need in order to predict our or influence our upcoming behaviors.
So it's revolution or hedonism.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting though, but sometimes I feel like, okay, so when I watch a movie, I'm a consumer who is paying money, feeding an existing system, a business that is a thriving business, a corporate business that is, those that criticize films say that it's, it's like a soma that's keeping us all placid and mindlessly entertained. But when I see a movie that I love, I don't necessarily want to have a revolution against that system. I actually enjoy the film, and I'm glad I live in a world where these expert filmmakers can amass these resources to make these amazing cultural technologies for me to experience. But I don't know if that just makes me...
we still have those. There's still great movies. We were talking, you go to a Chris Nolan movie, and it'll blow your little mind. I mean, that's a good thing, not a bad thing.
Yeah, but I guess that's what I'm saying.
It's when we're not conscious. So then it's like, okay, now I can make my own movies, right? And you're one of the lucky ones, right? You can buy a Sony camera and buy an Apple computer and buy some Time Warner Roadrunner uplink speed, and you can now, instead of paying to watch a movie, you can pay to make a movie and upload it to YouTube where Google will own it. And if you're 1 out of 3 million, you can be one of the few that becomes, luckily you or
Google
me.
will own it, et cetera, but the point is technology has lowered the barriers of entry.
It's lowered the barriers to entry.
There's been a flooding of new talent.
There has been a flooding of new talent, but the number of people that have actually made it in the DIY system, if you look at music or filmmaking, is less than made it in the old system. The disparity between the stars
why do you
of
think
music.
that is?
Why? Because I think it's actually because they're not really selling the music. Because what we're really selling in this system are networks. And that's what I was just talking to Oliver Luckett, who runs The Audience. So he's it's a social media agency for rock stars and pop stars. And what they realized is, if you're going to be a pop star, you're not going to make money selling your records. What you can make money doing is selling your Twitter followers, is selling your Facebook likes. So what they do is help you amass...
currency of attention, right?
Right.
Attention is a limited resource. There's an infinite amount of signals competing for our attention. We're all suffering from bandwidth anxiety.
Right.
But those
you
with
could
the
take
loudest
Adderall for that.
Yeah. But those with the loudest microphone or amplifier in the age of information, that's where the wealth is, right? You can control attention, you can control the world. It's interesting because in the book, The Mating Mind, the guy talks about how the human capacity for creativity, language, art, poetry, is really just the human version of the peacock feather, and that we went from trading in genes to trading in memes. So today, evolutionary success is really those that are controlling the Twitter followers.
Right. And people like me were the ones...
their memes the widest and farthest.
And it's honestly, and it was little schlemiels like me who liked the trading with memes thing better than the trading with jeans thing. That's why I couldn't live in Los Angeles. I had to come to New York where I can get currency with the things I say rather than, my flesh.
Yeah, rather than your six-pack.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And you got both.
Okay, so I want to go back to what you were saying before about resetting the self, coming down from the trip, whatever that trip was, technologically mediated or drug mediated, and the therapeutic aspects of these experiences. Because one of the things that I've been obsessing with lately, and I've been doing a lot of videos about it, is the subject of awe. And I tell people that awe is, to me, it's a sort of an antidote to existential despair. You know that I'm really into Ernest Becker. He says the human condition is defined by the fact that we know that we are mortal beings. So we lose sleep over the fact that one day in the future we're going to die. And that imbues the human experience with a kind of absurdity, right? We are simultaneously gods and worms. We can ponder the infinite, yet we watch those that we love get old, ourselves get old, and eventually die. And so I find that whether it's psychedelic therapy or whatever, inspiration, awe, aesthetic arrest are the antidotes to that experience. So ego death, being blissed out, arrests time, temporarily pushes aside thoughts of impending doom, takes us off that people mover that's carrying everyone else towards death. And then there was a study that came out of Stanford where they basically exposed people to experiences of awe. which they defined as experiences of such perceptual expansion that people had to upgrade their mental schemata to accommodate the experience. And what they found is that people who have regular incidences of awe are left with increased altruism, increased well-being, increased feelings of compassion towards other people, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. Like there's all these takeaways after blowing your own mind.
Yeah,
the therapeutic
there are. And awe was systematically extracted from the human experience over the last 600 years, because people in awe, people who have awe experiences are dangerous, we're unpredictable.
They get hit by a car because they can't cross the street.
Which is why we have psychedelic medicine, right? But psychedelic drugs, they're still drugs, right? They're for people who are sick. They're for a society that's lost the ability to encounter awe, and they reacquaint us with awe, not so that we have to do it again and again and again, as Alan Watts said, once you get the message, hang up the phone, but rather to be able to experience awe, as I am right now, just sitting with you, or looking at my daughter, or having sex, or looking at a sunset. It's like, awe. The awe is everywhere. Do I need that medicine? Now, the technology is also good, because you can't get everybody high on acid. We found out in the 60s, people are afraid. You don't. But the computer, great. All right, so let's give people some awe experiences. Awe experience, great. Not so that they can then travel into the computer, into the land of awe, right? But so that now that they recognize awe, or a simulation of awe in this case, they can come back to the real world and go, oh my gosh.
But it's true, but the existentialist philosophers were always saying it. I mean, Camus used to say life should be lived to the point of tears. I mean, you read the Romantic poets.
Life should be lived to the point of tears.
Yeah, like
and you should go to a movie to experience a simulation of someone else's life. You can go into
because we can't have it in our own lives. Well, perhaps that is a tragedy. But you know what the problem is?
We can have it in our own lives. It's a thing. It's here. It's available. We don't need to pay Google for the awe.
Yeah, but
we don't. This is a way for white.
I don't know, man. I want to have my iTunes playlist with the custom music that I picked to be playing, conditioning my real experience. So I still want to use the technology. I still want to borrow from the...
there's reality out there you can listen to, too.
Like just the trees rustling?
Yeah. The trees rustling, I mean, gosh, going to, my favorite thing, and I lived in the West Village back when that was affordable, was there was a public school there, and I would stand at the chain link fence when they had recess and listen in perfect stereo to all the kids playing in this thing, and that was awe, right? But it was awe, it was right there.
Yeah. I've always envied people that just are naturally in awe. My mother is one of those people. I mean, she's just one of those people that just everything moves her. She finds beauty almost in everything. And then some of us that have to find ways to mediate and induce and occasion that experience, right? And so yeah, it's just something I'm really interested in.
Your videos are medicine in that sense. Because people, you're at work, you're doing this, you care about your stocks, and does it go up or down, and then my private school, my kid, and now I can watch a 3-minute video and go, oh, fuck. And that's the point, right?
Well, I mean, the 100%. I mean, the videos.
And brain games.
I try to
what are you doing? You're teaching people to play with their brain. Play with your brain. It's here for that.
Yeah, but it's interesting because the reason I did those videos was, thank you for using the term medicine, because I did them as self-medication. Like, it was like, if I was in any kind of stupor, if I was afflicted by the banality of the everyday, of the been theres and done that's of the adult mind, as Michael Pollan writes, I needed to be reset. And not every month does Christopher Nolan release a film, so you gotta wait for them, So when there's nothing I can purchase to give me that experience, I wanna go and make that experience. And finally I have the tools, right? And so I have limited resources and perhaps kind of a limited attention span and a kind of impatience and a desire to just make it now. So rather than spending 6 months doing a feature doc, I was like, I want to make these 3-minute videos because I want to take a 3-minute hit, like a hit a DMT. Like it's just like a 3-minute, but I want it to have all the energy of the most amazing movie trailer you've ever seen and all the ideas packed in there densely. And I want it to be like an Inception. Like you watch it and then it goes and percolates and it stays with you and this and that. And yeah, I mean, for me, it's been medicine. So yeah.
No, and it's cool. And the trick, though, is to help people understand that you're not necessarily describing reality, but you're giving metaphorical ways of understanding reality. So the mind is like a processor. Or we are like computers. We are uploading stuff. Memes are like genes, and we are infecting one another with ideas.
I love those metaphors. They help me understand the world a lot more. It makes everything make sense. That's the thing about
No, it
those kinds
does.
of metaphors.
They're just prone, right? In our society, those metaphors are prone to the sort of Margaret Mead, Gregory Bateson, abstracted understanding of reality as this kind of participatory mediated spectacle.
I love that term. Okay, so let's talk about cultural operating systems and the consensus trance. You were talking about that before, that when people have these psychedelic experiences, they come out of it and they realize that these social rigid frameworks that seem so solid and so real are much more fluid than we think they are. They've been created by other people. What do you think is
It's the same thing that happens when you watch a Shakespeare play or a Brecht play or have good sex or go to a good religious ritual too.
Yeah.
I mean,
but so what do you think, how can we upgrade our social operating systems? Like, do you ever speculate of what a better society?
yeah, I mean, for me, it's
We all
funny.
run around naked.
For me,
What do
the
we-
digital thing is so key because we have migrated, from an industrial age society to a digital one. But for me, the digital is the opposite of the kind of global Google meta network thing. For me, digital was always the digits. Right? It was about return. These are the digits. That's what digital means. The return to the fingers, to not to individuality as individual consumers, but to the local means of production. And for me, the whole local thing, the Etsy thing, the retrieval of medieval values and Burning Man and Occupy are all about the same thing. I mean, I love Occupy not in the terms of a political occupation, but the idea of occupying reality. Let's occupy.
Own this space.
Right,
Be
and then
here
digital
now.
does that. I mean, because I was a kid who went from the television mass media experience to the digital experience, which was so peer-to-peer and connected.
Yeah.
And
Well,
so
it's
that was,
interesting to hear you talk about, like, occupy this, be here now. I haven't been to Burning Man. I'm embarrassed to say, but I need to make it over there. I read Eric Davis's essay on Burning Man.
and you've been there.
Yeah, oh my God. But one of the things.
And now it's not Burning Man.
that-
It's not Burning Man any more than the internet's the internet. I mean, Burning Man
but
is
no.
where if you're a young Google executive, you go and prove you're cool by living in a
but
trailer.
the people that have transcendent experiences there, to me, it seems like the place creates this kind of radical novelty that, by virtue of just being bombarded by the juxtaposition of so much originality, it's so different than what you see every day. You don't have mental references for what you're seeing, so it induces that wonder, that imagination explosion. And what that does is it serves it's like a drug, right? It serves the purpose of transforming your perception of the present moment and the passing of time, the unfolding of time, and just experience changes, right? Subjectivity is transformed.
Right. To the
That's
point.
interesting.
To
the
the
hacking
to the
of subjectivity,
purpose,
I think, is like.
But to the purpose of then being able to recognize and foster the things that you see in real life. I mean, I was at a tree trimming party with a piñata the other day, and the piñata fell, and all the boys are shoving and kicking and trying to get and everybody gets their candy and their little toys and all that, and we're all like, oh my God, this is so. And then, like 10 minutes later, nobody's looking because then the kids are off. I see like 5 girls in a circle, and my daughter is one of them. These are 8-year-old girls in a circle, and they're trading like candy with each other. And it's this very sophisticated sort of modalities of what different things are worth. There's a piece of plastic, it's like a toy, and that's worth $2. And so immediately a peer-to-peer, a bazaar in the medieval sense, a bazaar assembled. It was social, it was commercial, it was everything. And I was just like, it happens, it does happen. I mean, and this natural cooperation, that was Burning Man, it happened there, without the drugs and without the computers.
Right. So, okay, I want to ask you about creativity. Just like a big word.
You're the creative one.
Well, we're both
I'm an
creative
author.
guys. No, but just how do you just randomly just define creativity? Moments of aha. What happens when human beings step out of their usual mental frameworks what happens? What happens in the brain? What results? I mean,
See,
how do you
for me,
define
creativity is almost the fun way to describe what creativity is, and no one has a great definition for it, especially in a market society. But creativity is when humans do what only humans can do. You know, creativity is the expression of the paradox, you know, the ambiguity, the queerness, the weirdness.
Yeah.
It's these unique, novel
Yeah.
possibilities.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because I've been thinking a lot about what you just said, that ambiguity and this and that. The word liminality has to do with like the in-between, and so I've become really interested in these immersive, site-specific, interactive theater experiences. I was talking to you about Punch Drunk, Sleep No More. There's another one in Brooklyn called Then She Fell, which is a reference to Alice tumbling down the rabbit hole. And in these theater experiences, they create this space where you can pretty much go anywhere you want. And it's this nonlinear, interactive experience of the narrative. So you don't experience it in order, and you kind of are connecting the dots as you experience it, and figuring out what's going on is kind of the purpose of what you're supposed to do. But you enter it kind of, it described the experience as being inside of someone else's dream. And so it is this liminal space between dreams and reality, kind of like when you're watching a movie, kind of like when you're watching a piece of theater. Time, space, they kind of collapse. You can crisscross, you know, and cross-cut to anywhere, experiencing anything, and you believe it. So that's the landscape of mind and the landscape of imagination. Do you think we'll ever be able to create virtual reality technologies that allow us to essentially live in that space all the time? To live in like landscapes of mind? To just completely leave behind the sort of gravity of the body and its rigid, have to feed it, have to go to sleep at this time, you know, like just live in this wonderland all the time.
My sense is if we do it, it will be, the price will be we leave behind a few billion of our fellows to be in non-mediated, wonderful virtual things. I mean, it's the great way to get the city on the cloud, you know, so we can all be in virtual reality as long as we have, you know, little brown people in subcontinents, you know, feeding the coal into the whatever, into the
assuming
processors.
we wouldn't have like nanotech or solar technologies that could make this perfectly
it is.
sustainable.
It is, and because I don't think that we would have the drive to inhabit an alternative reality unless there was something we were trying to get away from. You know, be it some, you know, Philip K. Dickian apocalyptic dry desert future, and it's like, oh well, shit, I'm going into Second Life. See you later, honey. You know.
So you always think that the appeal is that this is bad and that is good, rather than, you know, this is pretty good. Humanity's come to this certain point, but now there's this like mental universe we can go to that's infinite and boundless. I mean, that was the dream of cyberspace, right? Those corridors of the mind.
Yeah, I think
William Gibson.
I think the better the virtual realities we build, the better I would think people will get at distinguishing between the virtual and the real. You know,
Kevin Kelly says real is going to be a really relative term in the future.
Yeah, but Kevin Kelly is a person who is, as a certain kind of Christian, imagines the end of the world. I mean, there are people that are still stuck in what I would consider to be a Renaissance era linear arc of sort of beginnings, middles, and ends. They're not playing the infinite game where the object of the game is to keep the game going. They're still playing a Renaissance era game where the object of the game is to win the game. Where they're stuck in the culture of the book, and I write books, I love them, but books are about beginnings, middles, and ends. Whereas video games are about
write a book that
keeping the
never
game
ends?
going. Can't do it, luckily. But no, I mean, it's
So when Kevin Kelly talks about the technium, when he describes technology as the seventh kingdom of life, and he says that it's a living thing subject to evolutionary forces that has wants and needs, do you think that this is just crap, or do you think that there's a truth to what he's saying? Or
I think it is like a living thing. I think it's algorithmic in nature. You know, it's a program. And while people are very algorithmic
Isn't
at
biology
times,
a program too?
it's like a program, and there's many things that are programmatic about it, but the more you hone in on that program, it skirts away from you like a tomato seed under your finger, and you realize, oh, it's not the DNA, it's the proteins around the DNA. Well, of course. Well, now we know. Oh, it's the protein. Oh, it's not the proteins, it's like something else. And, you know, there's
Well,
this other,
a lot of complexity for sure, yes.
It's not just complexity, though. It's not. You know, I'm not, in the end, I'm not a materialist. You know, I think that there's something going on here that we don't yet know about. You know, I guess it's Kantian or something, that we barely even perceive reality, much less are we able, we can't even recreate a simulation of what we perceive, much less the 99.9% of reality that we don't perceive. So I don't want to...
So you talk about the limitations in understanding our own consciousness, not to mention our limitations in creating instruments to perceive the world. Because we can't see the very small, but we create a microscope. We can't see the very large, but we create a telescope. I mean, we can peer into like the universe pretty vividly.
Exactly.
But you're saying what? You're saying
these guys buy
quantum?
a model. They buy a model of reality, and it may be true, where, you know, there was this matter, you know, it was a boom, and then all those things banged into each other, and they got more complex, and they got so complex that eventually there was emergent consciousness from it, right? That there was the Big Bang, and then there was time. Well, what if they're wrong, right? Because they still don't understand that at all.
What if there's a more satisfying answer?
What if consciousness preceded the Big Bang? What if consciousness was a prerequisite for the Big Bang rather than the result of the Big Bang? You know, then if it was, then, well, wait a minute, now what are we playing with? You know, so if we don't understand sort of the very basic building blocks of reality, I'm concerned about ditching reality for another one. I love Playland. I love Disneyland. I love movies. I love all these things, but I would never mistake them for reality. Disneyland's a great idea. I mean, and if, you know, a world where the trains worked on time, I feel like Disneyland is what would have happened if the Nazis had won and weren't evil. You know?
Oh, God.
You know? And that's fine. Then that's fine, but it's not the world, right?
But let me ask you something. You talked about how, okay, you like movies, you like video games, you like that, but they're not reality. You know, one of the interesting ideas in Chris Nolan's film Inception is this notion that the dream is real when you're in it. So if the simulation, if the representation can become immersive enough, can you ever essentially trick, hack, or convince your brain to forget to remember that it's subjecting itself to a simulation?
Yes.
So for example, when I went to see Gravity on IMAX in 3D, which I thought was a technical achievement in film I'd never seen before in terms of the places where the camera could go, it didn't make sense. You couldn't place it. And it was so immersive that during certain sequences, my body would jolt with the movements on screen as if it was happening to me. It was going primordial, deeper than my ability to remember this is a movie. And I think that eventually more and more of our simulated experiences are going to be like that. So it won't matter if they're not real when they're done, because when you're in them, they'll become real. The dream will be real while you're in it. What do you think of that? It's a cool idea, right?
Yeah.
I'm just trying to convince you to like this.
I like it. I just don't like it more than what I got. You know, I like it. Sure, it's great. It's great. Cool. Go for it. Wonderful. But if we are going to build these things, let's go back and say, okay, what's the purpose of these things? The purpose could be just because I want to get high, right? Just like the kid taking acid in the AC/DC parking lot instead of in the dorm room, you know, trying to figure out the world. So you're going to do it. And you're going to just get high.
The purpose is catharsis. I think that, well, we talk about like psychedelic therapies, but it feels like human beings, we need to have regular experiences that are cathartic. These like ego death, rebirth simulations, right? Like even, I was talking about Alan Harrington, who wrote the book The Immortalist, that even our lovers, even when we're in love, our lovers act as stand-ins for various dream figures in a staged, managed resurrection where the pilgrim without faith can die and live again. I mean,
so why not just do it in the dream?
We need these archetype spaces, these landscapes of minds, where we sort shit out, you know? Like that's the world, the world of the self, the world inside, and that's what these movies connect to, I think.
They do. They do, and that's fine. It's just, you know, the world of the self can be ultimately a lonely place. It's not a social place. You You know, the world is, work on yourself. Sure, you know, and this is New York. Everyone goes to therapy for 45 minutes once a week or twice. I mean, we all know what inner work is about and why it's great, but the reason we do inner work is so that we go out of the office and then engage with people and deal with the real problems of distributing the surplus of stuff that we have in America somehow to all the people that need it, instead of burning food every week and ripping down houses in California because the prices aren't high enough. It's like the practical concerns are so real.
Yeah, well, I completely agree with you, but the practical concerns are also, they are being addressed. I mean, you know, there was an article in the New York Times recently that said that the lowest level of poverty, the most extreme form of poverty, has almost been eliminated across the world. You have, you know, Steven Pinker, who wrote The Better Angels of Our Nature, and his TED Talk, The Myth of Violence. It says that, contrary to what you see on the news, the chances of a man dying at the hands of another man are the lowest that they've ever been in history. You know, I mean, there's all these indicators that, you know, things are getting better, but, you know, the media feeds us doom and gloom. So, I mean, obviously, everything you're saying is true, but, like, it's not like there's not an active effort right now at addressing the fundamental challenges of humanity. I mean, do you have optimism at all in that space?
Oh, I got lots of optimism. I just want to make sure we don't use these medicines the same way that, say, America uses Prozac, which is a way
Fair enough.
to
numb.
To numb, yeah, exactly. To help us cope with reality as it is, rather than engage reality to make it less painful.
And on that note, I think it's time for our Q&A. It's about 9 o'clock.
And don't assume that this is like pro-anti here.
Yeah.
We're both pro and anti and all that. We're
Exactly.
just kind of, I mean, it's sort of the rules of brain jazz in a way. You kind of stake out positions. On another night, under different medications, we could as easily be taking opposite stands. This is just sort of where I'm at right now, because I was really disappointed. Really, it all for me, it's my disappointment in Bitcoin. You know, it really
I read an article about that today. Yeah.
It really is. I'm disappointed. It's like we have the opportunity to invent entirely new currencies rather than just remake an investor's speculative central currency in a digital format. It's like so stupid.
Mic check. Hi. Hey. You guys talked at different points throughout the Brain Jam about these value shifts. I think you talked about how in the industrial age, we got stripped of some pre-existing values and we got some new ones. And I've heard other people refer to the digital age as also a knowledge age. You know, so some of the values are already kind of like embedded in what you're saying. So like the peer-to-peer kind of like network, that's obviously kind of like a value that rises up post-industrial age, whatever we're in now. What other, looking into like, let's say 2050, right, where you do have this kind of like radical transformation, radical kind of integration of organic matter and artificial, solar technology, all this stuff, just like it's at a mature stage. I wouldn't say it's stabilized, but it's definitely like at a mature stage. What are the values that humanity will hold kind of like and prioritize in the future?
Who knows?
You're going to be here. I mean, I think right now, that's part of why this moment's so interesting, is it's up for grabs. You know, right now we're choosing whether we're going to reify the values of the industrial age, which are efficiency over time, extracting value out of people and resources and all that, in order to push through somehow, do the industrial age on steroids, or are we going to use this opportunity to do some cultural resetting and retrieve the values that were repressed the last time out, which is when the Renaissance happened. You know, when the Renaissance happened, we got the invention of the individual and centralization and perspective. We got, a whole lot of values, and other ones were repressed, like women, and peer-to-peer, local, the bizarre, all those kinds of things. I would love to say in 2050 we end up in a reality where 85% of our needs are met locally through peer-to-peer networks of people we're engaged with in the places that we live. And 10 or 15% of our weird, cool stuff comes from big international high-tech companies that make us phones that have very, very big supply chains, that will move into either some kind of a world with many cottage industries that are all networked, and it'll be vastly more efficient. Or if the big data people have their way, we'll end up entirely more predictable than we've been before, and we'll be easily influenced to just purchase whatever the next thing is.
Well, there was a recent article that said that physicists discovered basically a law of physics that can predict the growth of cities. So like even the behavior of human beings and the unpredictable changes that happen, that can all be described by an equation. That cities are like organisms and they have all these metabolic rates. So yeah, who knows? I mean, maybe what big data is going to reveal is something that it scares us to admit, which is that we're not really these free, autonomous, creative beings, even though it feels that way subjectively. But at a macro scale and looking at all the data points, that we're just algorithmic cascades after all. And we have to maybe live with that duality. Like, sure, the big data AIs can predict everything we're going to want, but it doesn't feel that way to me. For us, it'll feel like we live in this like carnival land of novelty where everything is interesting and everything is awesome. And people in the imagination business in 2050 have storytelling technologies that are dazzling in their capacity to wow us. And the movies like Gravity, in 2050 will be that much cooler.
And the materialists, dismiss this sensibility. They call it essentialism. Oh, it's essentialism. You're a sophist. It's some weird romantic, melancholy for this idea that human beings are weird and that your perception matters or that you have free will. And this illusion is good enough for me to I'm going to work with it. I'm going to behave as if this is real and as if they are the ones who haven't figured things out. At the very least, there's to be a balance between materialism and whatever we want to call this, spirituality, for lack of a better word. Rather than having to fall all the way into one camp or another. And throughout history, they've generally moved hand in hand. And it was really only after the invention of sort of rational science and that this stuff that we're talking about got poo-pooed as being some kind of woo, weird, womanly, Fritz Capra, woolly master nonsense, where I think it's real. It's as real as your perception of reality, and your perception of reality is more. I would argue it's all we really have to go on, more than what than the metaphors we have to describe it.
Thank you. Hey guys.
Hey.
Quick question.
Where are you?
Here.
Okay.
So, do you think drugs and psychedelics are still going to be around the age of singularity or 50 or 100 years from now? Like, how are people going to get high? Is it going to be in the form of a hack or computer code? Or how are they going to open up those doors of perception?
Well, this is the thing, is also even the way that people describe drugs in most cases is not as interesting to me as some people. I don't know if you've talked about this, but this guy, Rich Doyle, who I really enjoy as well, he says that drugs are actually information technologies, and the philosopher Eliade calls them technologies of ecstasy, and he talks about humanity's cognitive toolkit, as essentially stuff that we found in nature, but we've been using it as part of our mental toolkit for tens of thousands of years. So I imagine we're going to have a new generation of smart drugs because just because it's chemistry doesn't mean it's not technology. These are still going to be tools that we use to play with the essence of self. And I think that the best is yet to come. I mean, people read a book like Brave New World and they're like, oh, there's so much. I don't know. I mean, there's a guy called David Pierce. He wrote The Hedonistic Imperative on the internet. It's a wonderful treatise about how we're going to use nanotech and biotech to create dazzling new spectrums of subjectivity, like realms of mind that are unfathomable, as unfathomable to us as the nuances of Shakespeare are to a great ape. And so it's useless to even speculate in a way.
Yeah. And if we get really, really good at fine-tuning our shamanic alchemy, right? And when we can play the brain exactly as we want it, you know, cool. But there's something that the mushrooms tell you that synthetic, perfectly modulated chemical won't. The mushrooms are going to tell you some stuff you may not want to really hear when you're high. Like, hey, you're fucking up the planet here. Hey, you're cheating on your girlfriend there. Why haven't you talked to me in the last 3 years? I have something to tell. I mean, it's like...
It's not a guilt-free high.
It's not what's guilt. I mean, yeah. I mean, it's not. It has the plants, the sacred plants have agendas. We're in relationship with ayahuasca. We're in relationship with the Torah. You know, and with the ones that we make, we're not in relationship with. Then we're just going. So again, it's about, I think it's a bit about balance. You know, Rupert Sheldrake talked about there's a morphogenetic field of our whole species memory with the plant. Maybe, but I think it's the plant. You know, I think it is the plants that we've been in relationship with for however many millennia. You know, understand, and they can help balance us in ways that we might not choose to balance ourselves with, you know, if we moved exclusively toward designer chemicals and designer states of consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
Hey guys, I just want to say thank you for just blowing our mind, and that was way too fast. But bear with me while I work through this question. So first and foremost, you know, in a society where the only socially conditioned and accepted plane of consciousness is kind of that producer-consumer plane of consciousness, where the only way that we could afford ourselves the opportunity to explore the world of art and spirit is exactly to do so, is to afford to do that and create a company where maybe we can unfurl through our creative mind in that company. But of course, a company or a business is there to create financial security, to create money. I just want to know, how can we afford the opportunity to stay in this world, the world of art and spirit, and mine the soul? But what I'm really interested in is, what was your answer to this question before you were Douglas Rushkoff, media theorist and author, or Jason Silva, futurist, techno-optimist, and philosopher? How did you live into this answer, and how has that changed now that you're on the other side? Because you made it.
I mean, I was lucky, right? I for the first, you know, 8 or 10 years of my career, I made $8,000 to $10,000 a year, you know, and I just didn't mind because I was having fun while the yuppie scum were all going to work, you know. So, I mean, that was the beauty of coming out as a slacker, because it was. You know what I mean? It was celebrated that with me and my friends, the idea was not to have to work. That's why now when I look at Obama talking about jobs, let's create jobs for everybody, it's like, who wants a fucking job? You know? I don't want a job. I want stuff and access and all that, and I'd like to create, you know, things and have meaningful engagement, but I don't want a job. You know, job is an artifact of the Renaissance. People didn't have jobs until 1300. They used to make stuff and trade, and they only got jobs when it was illegal to make stuff yourself. You had to go work for a chartered corporation. So, you know, when I hear questions like that, it's like, oh, because we're accepting the premise of this BS industrial age business model that was there for kings and bourgeois who have long since left the building, and we don't even remember it's their operating system that we're keeping going. So there's that. Lentils and rice is another answer.
I love lentils and rice.
Yeah, but you can live.
I still eat lentils and rice.
You can live a long time on lentils, rice, and water. You can, and fine spices and stuff. You know, you can, you know, without even being freegan, you can survive. And I did that for a good long time. And I tutored kids on their SATs. I mean, that taught me a lot, because I was in Beverly Hills. I would drive to these Beverly Hills mansions in my used Ford, you know, Escort, and I'd park like between the gardener and the maid, and then go tutor some super rich kid, you know, for 3 hours for $35 an hour or something, which is enough to live a week, you know, if you did it frugally. So no, it was maybe those were easier times than now on some level, but no, I was lucky, and frankly, the fact that I was, you know, shoved out the chute of an Ivy League education after a you know, Westchester High School childhood I mean, you could float, you've got such an advantage already. It's like you're not being put out on the ground. You're being, at that level of wealth, of an upper middle class parent, you're being shot out. You got a long way to go down before. So I'm a child of privilege. I see it that way. The fellows at Princeton, who are all these private school rich kids, saw me as the poor kid. Was the funny thing, But
Yeah.
no, so it was luck, and not getting off the bus. I think the big thing is, I've never worked for some other thing, so everything I did was investing in my own. I hate to use the word like brand, but in my own franchise, in me. And so it builds. The freelance lifestyle is more secure than having a real job, because they can't fire you, and you lose this contract, you got 5 more. I mean, it's.
Well, it's funny you say that, because there's some school of thought that says that in the future everything is going to be essentially freelance, and people talk about the rise of the creative class and these people empowered by technologies. And there was some article I read that was unbelievable. It was saying that there's a sort of mentality of people living in places like Berlin or Williamsburg, Brooklyn, that think it abominable to have to work for somebody else. And these are like these creative people that have the education of the upper class, but maybe the income of like the lower middle class. And so they're like these super intellectually affluent people that don't necessarily need things. And so they're not as dependent on money because they don't need to buy as much stuff, because they have everything, just their laptop on their iPhone, that's it, So that's really interesting. But to answer your question, I think for me, I like, Stephen Johnson has a great line. He says, the world is full of clues and you can read your way through it. So I've always kind of felt that like, the signs are there, connecting the dots on how I can do my thing and make it work. I was lucky enough to grow up in a household where my parents like encouraged me to kind of find my bliss, and just make it happen. But also, I think there's little techniques. George Carlin actually was interviewed recently about his career, and he was talking about psycho-cybernetics, and he discovered this book on psycho-cybernetics. Are you familiar with this? And he was saying that the brain is essentially a goal-seeking mechanism, and that there's these devices, these tricks you can use to create impressions in your brain that then teach your brain what to look for in the world to connect the dots to achieve your goals. And so he says the first impression is, okay, you get an idea, or you notice something that inspires you, and you're like, oh, that's what I want to do, or that's what moves me. So that's impression 1. Impression 2 is you write it down. So you write it down, you're already making a second impression, you're acknowledging it, you're writing it down. Impression 3 is looking at your notes later. And then by that point, you've kind of primed your brain with this trajectory of this network of ideas or concepts or whatever things that are turning you on. And then what happens is, a few days later, you're walking down the street, and all of a sudden you start noticing all these serendipitous signs that are connected to like what you were thinking about. And people are always called that magical thinking. They're like, oh, it's the secret, I'm attracting it. It's not that. It's that you've primed your brain to connect the dots using that meta pattern, right? Because the signs are always there, You can read anything in any way, but in a way you're kind of like hacking your brain to pay attention to the clues that are going to help you achieve what you want to achieve, And I feel like I didn't know about psycho-cybernetics, but it actually echoes a lot of the things I've done. Like if I look at like my notes from like 3 or 4 years ago, I have like these scribblings and these lists of like describing exactly what like ended up happening in my life, like exactly like where I was going to be and what I was going to do, and describing it. And it's just crazy how then you end up like having those patterns just marked in your head, and then you kind of, it's a thought.
Is it on? Wow, what a question. I've been reading a lot of history recently, and it seems to me that in the large scale, all of human history is kind of like humanity trying to get up on its knees and reach up for this higher ideal, and falling again, and then reaching up again, and then falling again. And Kierkegaard said that the good is slow, the evolution of good is slow, because when you have revolution, it destabilizes what's already there, and that just causes more revolution, whereas when the good is slow, it's evolution, it doesn't leave anybody behind. And that was just a comment, that wasn't a question, but I recently read in a Russian magazine an article that questioned several spiritual leaders, Christian, Buddhist, just trippy people, some professors, about their psychedelic experiences and what that had to do with their spiritual growth, and they all unanimously said that it had nothing to do with their spiritual growth. it did cognitively and it did with their experiential growth, but nothing to do with spiritual growth. And in my personal opinion, I believe that the whole point is spiritual growth. So wouldn't the intention, well, so their amazing psychedelic experiences, they said, really corresponded to their state of mind and what they were primed to find in the first place. So wouldn't the intention, whether of a good trip or building up this amazing like alternative reality world for ourselves, wouldn't the intention be a lot more important than the actual trip or the experience?
I mean, for me, psychedelics seem much closer to psychotherapy than spirituality. And part of that is because there's a duality implicit in taking a drug, right? There's before you take the drug and while you're on the drug and after. You're getting high, right? So high means and then you're low. So there's this sort of duality in it. And for me, I got really into this idea of, birthing another human species through collective whatever. It was sort of when I was back in the sort of rave psychedelic mode. And I thought that the ultimate spiritual progression of our species will be to achieve meta-organism and then give birth to some other thing. And then, so I had that, and then I get married and have a kid and went, oh, that was easy. Well, hard, but you know what I mean? But that was it's like the real tools of evolution have been staring me in the face all the time, and they are more subtle, they are more slow. They're not these giant system-wide, revolutionary leaps. Revolutions are what? Revolutions are circles. That's what they do. I'm into Renaissance, which is what? Rebirth of old ideas in a new context. So you get a new technology, a new media environment, and now we can retrieve things and bring all those who didn't come along with us and go, oh my gosh, those Aboriginal people that we thought were all doing nonsense, they actually have the technology that we need in order to get incrementally forward.
I concur.
Hi.
Hi.
So Douglas Rushkoff touched on this before, on the fact that the agendas matter, like the agendas that we have matter. And so I guess what I'm trying to ask is that to Jason Silva, when you talk about this future where our technologies advance so much, and singularity and what's going to happen after that, don't you ever feel afraid that things will advance so quickly without necessarily thinking about what we want to do, what our agendas are, when we have this future? I feel like, what happens if these things do end up in the wrong hands? What happens if it's in the right hands, but we don't necessarily know what to do because things are moving too fast for us?
Sure. I mean, there's a great article in the website for the Edge Foundation that was saying that when the astronauts first turned around and took a picture of the Earth from space, that changed the story of who and what we were. That picture provided a different context and a different way of seeing and understanding ourselves, and in turn changed the story, changed the context, changed the story, changed reality of what we are. And that now, in the face of these emerging technologies, that we are due for a new story. And I'm not a scientist. So I tell people, I was hearing this filmmaker once saying, I'm in the feelings business, or I'm in the imagination business. But I feel like, my small contribution to that is the exploration in the media that I make. So my short videos are speculative, and they're about technology, but they're also about metaphysics, and they're about the human condition, and they're about love, and they're about loss, and they're meant to provoke a conversation and a discussion, And I always say I just want a seat at the table, you know what I'm saying? Because I agree with you. I think that we need to be talking about these agendas, and I want to be part of that conversation for sure. I mean, that is an ambition of mine for sure.
That's funny. I remember the first few times I was interviewed when I did my first book. What are you doing? I said, I just want a seat at the table. I used to say that all the time. I just want to be a part of that conversation.
Yeah, exactly.
A real part of that conversation.
Yeah.
But the thing is, then you get your seat at the table. And now, which is sort of where she's going, it's well, now what? Now you got your seat at the table, and then you realize, oh, I'm not a journalist. I'm a propagandist, right? And that's okay. So what am I, I mean, because we're all propagandists. There's no such thing as balanced journalism. That was
Right.
such a stupid idea that
Yeah.
would be balanced. It's like, where do you put the fulcrum?
Stop pretending, exactly.
Yeah. So instead, we're arguing for something. We're fighting for something. We're trying to persuade people of something. We're trying to at least get our mirror neurons activated by people
Exactly.
agreeing with us.
Yeah.
You know, and then what? But then what do we want to throw out there? You know, is where you go with it. And it's funny, for me, it started, I used to say, oh, what I'm trying to do is get people off their bad trip. I felt like I'd go in front of audiences and everybody's, oh, technology and this and oh, the internet, and I'm going to have to change, I'm going to have to learn something.
You told me that that's what the phase I'm in right now, right?
To get
I'm getting people off their bad trip.
Get
There
people
you
off
go.
the bad trip to say,
That's my
it's
phase.
going to be okay. Waking up's not going to be so hard. It's going to be okay. Everything, it's okay. Don't worry. It's all right. Have fun. You know, and follow them down their corridors so that they really believe that you understand the terror, you know, so that you can take them out of there. But then it's like, so then what? You know, then what? I mean, and you can do that because the phase of life that you're in is you still have the exuberance to make people feel comforted, you know, and okay and excited. But then it's like, okay, so then when they're on the trip, now
Who's steering the starship?
yeah, what do we do with that? And I tell you,
It's a work in progress.
yeah, but the ones who've been steering the starship, I don't trust them. I mean, whether it's Mark Zuckerberg or Sergey Brin on they're at that side, or whether it's, you know, Ray Kurzweil or Kevin Kelly and those guys, I don't trust them either. I feel like they are still in the story. You know what I mean? They're still trying to figure out a story, and what story are we going to tell? And I think it's time. Stories are for children. You tell children stories at night so they go to sleep, right? And you try to dose it with some programming about the morals that you want them to have when they grow up. But I think we're past stories. Now we're in something more like a game, or more of an adventure, or more an experiential, something like the theater experiments you were talking about. You know, and it's a different way of taking people.
Hey guys, this side.
Hey.
And kind of related to that, in this age where technology and social media are kind of like this limitless extension of our individual being, can it be kind of counterproductive in that in interpersonal communications where, especially young people, there is no delete key, and it's kind of taken them away from improvisational face-to-face conversation where they're uncomfortable interacting with people, where they can't go back and, you know, delete what they've said, where now there's this kind of insecurity in just talking face-to-face.
And then throw the market on top of that, you know, in a value system where you actually have a number of how many friends you have as a way of judging, you have metrics for your popularity and success. It's tricky, right? 94% of human communication happens non-verbally. So what happens when you grow up in an environment where you're using text to engage? I mean, you end up with a kind of an induced Asperger syndrome, where, you know, you don't make eye contact. You're afraid to make eye contact. You don't know how to establish rapport. You don't know how to not just stand up in front of a group of people, but to engage live with one other person. You resort to this, or you want to, you know, you relate through the selfie rather than through the self, and it's
yeah, no, and I agree. I agree with what you're saying to an extent, but I also think that is a criticism that is biased in favor of the communication style that we're comfortable with and that we're used to, and this assumption that this new one is not as good, et cetera, you know. But Kurzweil, you know, who is a friend of mine, he says, look, we're not going to be interacting with each other through these square-shaped devices. I mean, these are temporary growing pains. I mean, these devices are going to be shrinking down to the size of blood cells. They're going to be in our brains. You know, sending a text message is going to be, I mean, very different than like going down into a screen like that. We'll be able to just send our thoughts to one another. Maybe we'll transcend verbal communication. Maybe we'll transcend words. We'll be able to like become each other and merge our consciousnesses. Like, I mean, there are all these speculative, exotic things on the horizon potentially, but I think, you know, to criticize it now as if it was the end of like the way humans communicate, I'm like, no, it is what it is, and if you are not a fan of it, then make sure you practice being present, you know. But I wouldn't label it like the end of the world, you know. It just is what it is.
I don't think it's the end of the world, but I think it has to be balanced is all.
Yeah.
You know, by some real world engagement. You know, I get concerned when I see kids in a classroom with a teacher and they're all looking at their tablets. You know, it's like, no, when you're in the classroom with the teacher, you shouldn't even be looking at the book. I mean, remember Captain, My Captain? They put away the poetry book and they engage with each other, you know, because that's our face-to-face time is so minimal. And how are we going to know, you know, what the nanos should do if we don't, if we aren't experiencing the full breadth of what we already have?
I think we have time for like 1 or 2 more questions, and then we have some vodka for you guys if you're over 21. Thank you to Russian Standard Vodka for providing the free vodka bar after this.
Okay, so you guys obviously have a lot of views on psychedelics and stuff, but what do you think the most legitimate and I guess most efficient way to reintroduce psychedelics as like a legitimate tool?
It's already happening. I mean, the majority of Americans now in the latest polls support full marijuana legalization. The majority of Americans. So that's not even taboo anymore. And as that becomes more mainstream and more legalized, you're going to start to see the emergence of a class of citizen that is not the stereotypical stoner with the bong hit playing video games. But what's going to happen when these, oh my God, all these screenwriters like to get high, all these brilliant thinkers like to get high? Wow, oh, not everybody uses it in a destructive, addicting way. So this is a tool for your creativity? Oh, that's interesting. You know, they've done a recent study that looked at semantic priming in marijuana, found that marijuana actually induces a state of hyperpriming, which means it expands your associative net. It expands your capacity to connect the dots between seemingly disparate ideas. A sign of creativity right there. Or at Johns Hopkins University, where they're doing psilocybin mushroom studies with people who have terminal illnesses and making them like take, you know, process their own mortality in a radically different way. I think even the government, I mean, there is going to be a psychedelic renaissance, and I think we're already seeing it a little bit, right?
Yeah. I mean, I'm certainly I'm more interested in that than watching big pharma neutralize the insight elements of these drugs and turn them into, you know, sort of coping neurotransmitter modulators. You know, which is where, you know, where they went with it in 30 years. You know, so and luckily, I mean, the plants are still there. You know, they're still, well, it's not illegal yet, I guess. Well, a lot of seeds are illegal. So the whole thing with seeds and Monsanto and copywriting your genes and stuff, that gets really tricky too. You know, because if we take that, it's like right now, it feels to me like the technosphere and the marketplace are equivalent. You know, and if we can somehow parse them from each other, I'm going to like the technosphere a lot more, because then the agenda then it's to be like, what's technology for? It's to make us more human. Right. It's to realize our full potential.
Right.
Rather than what's technology for? Well, it's to enhance
what we can sell.
Yeah, what
Fair
we
enough.
can sell or how we can extract data.
Fair enough. Okay, one more question.
Okay, that's me. I'm the lucky lady right here.
All right.
Thank you so much for this conversation. Incredibly invigorating.
Aww.
Jason, you are like a electrifying optimist, and Douglas, you're a very reassuring, practical person for me. Shots of Awe is like a lightning bolt of inspiration, and I got super high on it, and then I was like, Crash, wait, there are some things he's just not talking about, and Douglas brings them into the conversation. So what would be incredibly awesome for me in my world is like a super organism, the way that like a flock of swallows fly through the sky. That, like if humanity could take that metaphor and, like you say, use technology to become more human and more telepathic and more in touch with each other, that we're like aesthetically, peacefully in harmony through the sky. That's what I want. Now, what I see as the barrier there is the digital divide and education. For me, education is that like exponential wormhole that could take us to this utopic future that you talk of. And I would love to hear what your thoughts are from a systemic perspective on how we can improve and enhance the system of education, because I've worked in education for a long time. And I'll tell you the statistics, the facts, in New York City is 40% of our kids are not graduating in 4 years. That's more than 500,000 students right now, snapshot, that are not going to graduate in 4 years. That's the size of the city of Atlanta. So it's like a whole city, sub-city within our city that are not going to be literate, let alone digital literacy, which is all these amazing things you're talking about, which I'm so excited about. but I'm like at a loss, and so I love to hear the conversation and debate, like what's going to get us there, because I believe we're going to get there, but I just need like a little bit more to hold on to.
Yeah, well, I mean, just briefly, I agree with the problems that you're talking about, but I think education is due for a massive upgrade. I think the whole idea of how we teach and how we learn, and whether it's doing more fMRI scans and introducing like crazy psychotropics into the classroom, I mean, maybe after you're 18. No, but I'm just saying, like, I think that we need to
just lost the job
completely
as chancellor of the schools in New York.
No. I just think that we need to not have an educational system that is still of like the Industrial Revolution age, you know? I mean, I went to a Montessori school, which has a kind of different philosophical agenda. But at the same time, I think these technologies and these tools are giving us radical new opportunities. I think there was a Bill Clinton article in Time magazine called A Case for Optimism, where he says that forget about the haves and the have-nots, because the cell phone was one of the greatest inventions in history to pull people out of poverty, for example. And the idea of the digital divide is actually not what we thought it was going to be, because people are wired, people are going on the internet. Whether or not they're using that to watch LOL cat videos or actually learn stuff online, that's something else. I'm a big fan of Sir Ken Robinson and a lot of his ideas about education, and kind of like not try to turn everybody into a robot and so on and so forth. But my mom also taught for 5 years at the South Bronx, so I'm also privy to a broken system, and I understand how that works as well. But I just think, you know, throw away what's not working, be willing to upgrade the whole thing, put everything into question if we have to. I mean, start from the ground up.
I mean, yeah, it's funny. This question, it brings up everything sort of I've been thinking about tonight. I mean, on the one hand, the thing I did after my after my decade of awe was looked and basically said, I'm going to go to the darkest places of mind and of reality and test my awe. And I'm going to go as deep as I can without losing it, and then pull back and figure out how to work with it. So, you know, the first thing, I went to South Africa before the elections and go around Soweto and see, basically test myself in the darkest possible places to then look, what do we do? In other words, as a way of challenging my awe and earning my awe, right, by going dark. So when I go dark, I'm not a pessimist, but I rather than just talking people down off their bad trips now from my happy young place, what I do is I go into the only good trip is a bad trip, right? I go into the bad trip so that I can then find my way back, get as lost as I can in the despair of, oh my God, and money and blah, 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 and then come back. Education is definitely one of those places. And education is the place where we can say, okay, we can use digital technology to build on our education system and make kids more job ready and teach them code and do this and give them that, and so they can get into IBM and in other words, or, you know, and that would be the constructivist approach, the dialectic approach. We're going to build on top of that. Or we can say digital technology and the big digital change is an opportunity to go back and say, and this is what the sophist would do. This is what the grammarian would do in this situation, is go, well, what's education for? What is it for? Right now, what it's for, if you look at, you know, Edward Cubberley, and who created a modern American or New York education system, it was to create, we all know, you know, workers for American factories. Right? So that's why they have bells after every class. This is why your school is like that. They're trying to make you a good factory person. The teacher is the foreman, and you students are the workers, and the bell rings, you go to the next place, you learn, you memorize this, you do that, follow my orders, and go. Do you have a hall pass? No? Good. Right. That's what it's for. It was constructed to do that. And now we're like, well, what is education for? You know, and it depends. It depends on what we think the future of the economy is. I mean, if education is to create a new peer-to-peer society of creative people who are engaging, if we accept the fact that we only need people working 10% of the time in order to give everyone the food and shelter and stuff they need, what are we doing with the other 90% of human activity? So then what you have to do is go back and you say, oh, well, education is to imbue people with the ability to do critical thinking. You know, it's the need for the liberal arts education is actually more important now than it was before, because now we need a generation who's going to ask the big questions. If anything, the purpose of education now is to create the people who can develop the next education system.
There you go.
You know,
it's very
meta. Go meta on it. But yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you guys. Join us for a drink.
Thank you. Yeah.